This video is going to discuss a particular research article, The Influence of Citizenship Norms and Media Use on Different Modes of Political Participation in the U.S., written by Lauren Copeland and Jessica Feazell. This was published in 2017 in the peer-reviewed journal Political Studies. This video is going to illustrate what a well-written literature review looks like. Specifically, we're going to talk about its organization, its use of headers and subheaders, the fact that it is written around ideas and more specifically around the concepts from the author's research question, and it's not a laundry list of authors. And then in the writing, it talks about the broad ideas and oftentimes where they were established chronologically, and then moves more specifically within that broad heading. So this particular article can be accessed using the UT Arlington Library's databases, and a separate video will talk about how to do that. When you access an article, you have the option of downloading it, which I recommend because then you can use it in a future project, and also you can organize it as best fits your organizational preferences in the cloud or on your laptop or PC. Notice that there's an abstract. Almost all, and maybe even every, peer-reviewed journal article will have an abstract. This is super helpful because it summarizes the study, it sets it in context, and it gives you a brief, in a nutshell, description of the findings. So here's the beginning of the article, and it lays out really clearly what the puzzle is and what is the thing that is really driving their big interest and why you should be interested. First sentence, social scientists have long been interested in why some people are more likely than others to participate in politics. It's pretty important. If we look around the world, look around the country, we notice that some people just don't vote, or some people don't read the newspaper or online articles talking about politics. They don't discuss politics. They don't get involved in their community. So we might be interested in why some people do and some people don't. And in fact, we've been doing this for a long time. So the article then goes on, second sentence, in addition to the tried and true predictors of political participation, such as education and political interest, additional purchase in this area has come from understanding how citizenship norms and patterns of media use influence participation. So right off the bat, the two things that they're going to add to this, citizenship norms and patterns of media use, and their influences on participation, all laid out in the first two sentences. Also notice that you could take out everything in parentheses and it would still make sense. What's in parentheses are the actual previous scholarly work on which their work rests. Remember when we talked about how to know stuff in general? We said the first thing you have to do is figure out what's already known. We also said that we want scientific knowledge to be generalizable, and we want it to build on previous information. That's exactly what this article is laying out in the first paragraph. Then they move on to their puzzle. However, it remains unclear how norms and patterns of media use influence different modes of participation, both directly and in tandem. In this article, we clarify how people's attitudes about what it means to be a good citizen inform how they participate in politics, as well as whether certain types of media use moderate the relationship between norms and political behavior. What they've done here is they've given you a hint as to their broad research question. I would recommend, if you are doing a project for another class where you are asked to understand what the state of the current literature is, and you are reading these journal articles, that you take notes in the margin. So on my own copy that I've printed of this particular article, in the margin, right here, I have written research question. And now, as it turns out, they're going to clarify their research question later on, and we'll get to that in a second. But you have a hint here of what their research question is going to be. Before they even get to the formal literature review, they make clear for us that the literature has already established this idea of citizenship norms, and more specifically that there are two types. So the Dalton 2006 is the citation on which they rest the idea that there are citizenship norms. Then they go on to say that not only Dalton in 2006, but in subsequent work in 2008 and 9, as well as Bennett in 8 and 2012, and Norris in 99 and 2011, have discussed different types within citizenship norms. This is what I was referring to at the beginning when I said there's the broad idea and then different types within it. They also have noted that there has been work linking norms to particular types of political behavior. According to these accounts, dutiful citizens are more likely to engage. Conversely, actualizing citizens are more likely to engage in non-electoral types. So they're kind of giving us a little glimpse into what the previous research has found, and they're going to link back up to this in their own discussion of their work in a different section. Further down the piece, we see that they acknowledge that there's some mixed evidence. However, evidence linking citizenship norms to political behavior is mixed, and they give a citation. And some studies challenge whether citizens fit neatly into typologies, and they give a citation. And notice how they phrase this next paragraph, another puzzle. So that's drawing the reader in. Sometimes scholarly articles can be dull and not necessarily well written, but when you use words like this, it draws in the curious investigator. Oh, it's a puzzle. That's interesting. In this particular paragraph, they talk about whether or not literature has found a relationship between norms and media use. And then what they're going to go on to question is whether or not that relationship between norms and media use together might have a relationship on behavior. And so you see they have several citations here. Some scholars theorize that dutiful and actualizing citizenship norms have corresponding forms of media use that reinforce participation, and again they give citations. And now they get to the heart of it. So they have kind of set us up as the reader to be interested, both because previous research has explored this, but it's not a settled matter. It is not something that we know everything about. Sometimes we use this analogy of a mine. So think about a gold mine or a silver mine. And we might remember from stories we were told that there are these veins in the rock of the particular ore that we might be interested in, so a vein of gold. And so we might talk about mining that particular vein until the vein is empty. So the analogy here is that though previous work has explored this, the vein is not empty. There's still more to mine from this. So in this study, we examine the relationships in the United States. First, we revisit the relationship between norms and behavior. Second, we ask whether people who obtain political information through traditional ways are more likely to engage in participation, and conversely, people who use digital or social media to obtain information are more likely to engage in non-electoral participation. And then finally, we examine the potential for citizenship norms and characteristically similar forms of media use to work together to reinforce behavior. Now, even though these things are not grammatically formed as questions, these are the research questions. So again, as I have printed this article and made notations in the side for my own use, here I have written down the first research question, what's the relationship between norms and behavior? Second research question, what's the relationship between media use and participation? And third research question, do norms and media use work together to affect political behavior? And so that's a really nice, right at the very beginning, before they've gotten into the heart of the literature review, they've set up their research question and they have grounded it in the previous research. The next thing I'd like to talk about is how we can, in our writing, in the format of our writing, signal to the reader our organization. And Copeland and Feazell have done a nice job here in using headers and subheaders. So the big thing they want to understand, their dependent variable, to do a little foreshadowing of what we'll talk about later in the semester, their dependent variable is political participation. And so that's the big thing they need to understand. And so they have laid out here the big issues in predicting political participation. Individual level predictors of participation has been critical to advancing our understanding of representation and democratic governance. Oh, hey, all of a sudden, we have an even bigger view screen on this. We have an even bigger wide-angle lens on why this is important. It's important to democracy. They go on to talk about the big things that people have studied, and they give us citations, and then the nuances, and they give us citations, 4 distinct modes, and they give us specifics. So again, going from the really big and broad down to the specifics. They go on to say of specific interest to us is the distinction between electoral and non-electoral participation. And they give us citations. Notice the next section here is in different font, and it's a visual indicator to us that it's a subheader. Headings and subheadings are a fabulous way in your writing to help the reader understand your organization. And I encourage you in your other classes where you are asked to write research papers to make use of headings and subheadings. It helps you write better and more effectively, and it helps the reader understand where you're headed. So, 2 components of this big thing, norms and behavior. So then they explain to us norms and what the research has found. And then they go on to talk about empirical studies examining relationship between norms and political behavior, and they give us citations. Subsequent paragraphs in this section continue along the same lines, and then what I especially love about this article, at the end of this particular subsection, they say, to summarize, which is fabulous. And in my own notes, I have the Greek letter sigma right here, which is shorthand for summarize or summary. Just so when I pick this article back up again, I have my own notation along the side. I don't have to reread or even really reskim because I have my notations about what I found important and my own visual markers as to the author's organization right here in the notes. Super helpful. So this particular video has talked about these different components of the research paper, of the article, and I've just talked about these first couple of sections. We won't go through the rest of the article, but you could and see if you can find the things that we've talked about, which again are the organization, the use of headers and subheaders, written around the ideas, more specifically the specific concepts, and not listing author by author, and then going from the broad to the narrow.